because on the river he might have a big decision to make.
He calls the 21,000. Almost 65 out there now. Big river card for Tom Dwan.
Tom's only decision now is how much money is he going to be able to get out of Ivey.
Pot Limit Omaha is a game that allows players to play many hands before the flop. Hot and cold equities run so close together that you can almost justify playing any single hand on the button. Unfortunately, what a lot of people don't realize is that they see great players open up with certain type of hands and they think, well, then I should be doing that. What they don't realize also is that the great players understand how to play those hands post-flop to maximize and minimize losses, and whereas they don't. And they don't even realize they're making mistakes. This is a great example of a hand that shows what Pot Limit Omaha is all about. You got two debatably questionable hands pre-flop, and then we get additional sort of fun, which is leading on the flop in PLO, and then sometimes having to fold a strong hand on the river. So we're going to get into this hand, and it's Phil Ivey and Tom Dwan playing 300, 600 Poker After Dark PLO cash game. There is a $1,200 straddle on for the game, and it's also four-handed. The other two players are Harrington, Jared Blesnick, and Phil Galfond. If you don't know anything about Harrington, he is known as someone who enjoys many a different name on the internet poker, and Phil Galfond is one of the top players in the entire world. Around this time, Tom Dwan was playing a ton of online. Phil Ivey's playing a ton of online. They were considered some of the best PLO players in the world. So Tom Dwan starts this hand off with about, I think it's like 60 big blinds. I think he has in his stack $71,000. So $1,200 straddle, $71,000. Now you can make an argument that you don't even have 100 big blinds. Playing a King Jack 10-5, very questionable play, but you are on the button, and how bad can it be, right? Yes. And Phil Ivey from the big blind, he decides to call with Ace Jack 9-6, Ace Jack of Diamonds, another marginal hand, and not sure. I mean, I don't know. They're super late into the session. I think what happens in a lot of live sessions is once you get late into the night, man, you just start playing any hand. So these plays pre-flop, both questionable, but that's the game. Let's get to the flop.
King, Queen, 9, Rainbow.
Tom Dwan flops the nuts. Ivey has a gut shot draw to a higher straight.
That's 7,000.
Ivey's bet of 7,000 can be raised to a maximum of 29,500. Dwan gonna smooth call the 7,000.
All right, so here we see the action. King, Queen, 9 flop. Tom Dwan flops the nut straight. He also has the king in his hand. And Phil Ivey flops bottom pair with a gut shot straight draw to the nuts and backdoor Bangkok, aka backdoor nut flush draw. And he does block the 10 jack for the nuts. So Phil Ivey decides to lead here. And so this is what's going to happen sometimes in PLO, especially shorthanded, is that when you play a lot of hands, you're going to need to sometimes mix it up. And leading in this spot was something that I didn't quite notice at first, but when I really dug into it, I think it's a super, and I say interesting a lot. I need to think this authority for interesting. I use interesting a lot, but this is really interesting because I think what's going to happen often in this spot is that your opponent, when he leads to you on King, Queen, 9, is going to be incredibly unbalanced. Now, what I mean by that is that he's probably likely to lead either 10 jack, and often he won't lead that hand. He's not going to lead a set of kings. He's not going to lead 9s. He's not going to lead King, Queen, King, 9. And what's going to happen is he's going to be leading some 10 jacks, but a bunch of Ace Jack 9-6, Ace 10 9-6, some Queen Jack, those type of hands. He's going to be leading a lot of hands that have a pair and a gut shot, or just two block. I mean, I guess he could have pocket jacks or something like that. And also, this is kind of interesting. So we go back to pre-flop, and we noted that Tom Dwan starts the hand with about 60 big blinds. So also on a board like King, Queen, 9, most of Phil Ivey's Jack 10 combinations, we can assume he's not playing super loose from the big blind, even though, I mean, we can just assume he's not playing incredibly loose. So that's going to eliminate a lot of Jack 10 combinations. So you think about what Jack 10s he's going to be calling with here. Pre-flop, 8-9 10 Jack, 7-8 7-8 10 Jack, King, Queen, 10 Jack, you might 3-bet, Ace, Queen, 10 Jack, you might 3-bet, Ace, 10 Jack, maybe with a dangler that's one suit. He probably wouldn't 3-bet that hand. He'd probably call with that hand. So once again, we kind of go back to what his hands are, and a lot of the 10 jack combos are going to be strong hands that he might want to 3-bet here pre-flop, especially with that stack size. Now, this also is a game where I'm not quite sure how much they're trying to take advantage of someone who's got 60 big blinds and who's opening up king jack 10-5 on the button. In theory, you should be 3-betting that guy and punishing the fuck out of him with a little bit wider of a range for value pre-flop. But, I'm not sure how often Ivey's going to do that, so maybe he might have a couple more 10 jack combinations in his hand. And so we go back to the flop and we go back to the lead. And so now we think about it from Dur's perspective. And I mean, this is something you can kind of take back to your own games when you play, is that when someone leads in a spot like this, once you know they're an aggressive player who's playing a lot of hands and they're going to decide to start with a leading strategy, which isn't super common, I think most likely at first it'll be weighted towards value. But once you discover that they're not really leading for value there very often, and when they do lead and they show down, they often have a hand like this. Well, you can exploit that. You can exploit that by calling a little bit lighter, by raising the flop, assuming you're deeper. And I don't want to overanalyze this spot too much, but I think this spot is just it's fun. It's a really fun spot. I think this spot is what makes PLO beautiful. It's just a beautiful game. There's so much uniqueness. There's so many things to think about during the hand, and yeah, I love it. And we look at Dur's spot, king jack 10-5. I think call is pretty standard here. When you raise, you're going to be folding out all Ivey's bluffs. We've already established that he's probably not leading with many hands for value in this situation. So I think in Dur's spot, a call here is incredibly simple. What hands would he be raising with here? I was trying to think about that, and I'm not sure. Maybe king jack something with maybe 2 back doors that just wants to take advantage of his fold equity. When he gets called, he still's got a gut shot. Maybe like a ace queen jack or something like that. Ace queen jack, some type of hand like that. But yeah, I think often here Tom Dwan's just going to be calling or folding. So now we go to the turn.
I like this play, actually.
Until the 10 of clubs shows up, of course. Now Dwan is playing the king high straight while Ivey has Broadway.
Tom Dwan does have a couple of outs. A king or a 10 will give him a full house, and an ace will let him chop.
21,000.
Ivey fires again.
Dwan didn't like to see that card at all. He had the nuts, now he doesn't have the nuts anymore. He's not going to fold in this spot. He's just trying to get a good look at Ivey because on the river he might have a big decision to make.
He calls the 21,000. Almost 65 out there now.
All right, so turns 10. Bingo. Phil Ivey makes the nut straight. Now Tom Dwan has 2 pair, and he also has a straight. Now, Ivey decides to bet big here. He bets 21,000, which is just about pot. And Dur's going to be left with about 40,000 behind. So pot 64,000, Dur's left with 40,000 behind. Now, I'm not sure about this sizing. I think that from a standpoint where if you play with your opponent a lot of hands on line, when you take this line and then you bet pot on the turn, it's just doesn't really give you much room to maneuver. So we can kind of go back to what we think Phil Ivey's range is on the flop before in Tom Dwan's spot. We think he has a lot of pairs plus gut shots. Well, this is a very bad card for any pair plus gut shot range. And now what would Ivey do if he had a hand like ace, 9, 10, something? Well, I think he would check in that spot because Tom Dwan's range to Phil Ivey in this spot is going to look like very similar type of range. Some set of king hands, but some of those hands, I don't think those hands would always raise the flop. Some set of kings, king, queen, king 9, king jack, king 10 type hands, some of the nut straight, some ace jack type hands, some ace 10 type hands as well. So in this situation, when you're in Phil Ivey's spot, it's like a spot where he's going to be, once again, super unbalanced because what bluffs is he going to have in this situation? He's going to have no bluffs. And you might say he doesn't need to have bluffs in this spot. Maybe, but at the same time, you always want to be thinking about it. You always want to be saying, all right, well, do I always have ace jack in this spot? I always have 10 jack in this spot. Now, would he take this same bet sizing with just a jack high straight? trying to get Tom Dwan to fold out a worse straight by the river? I don't think so. And also, you just miss out on a ton of value. So, for instance, you have 10 jack here and you bet 21,000, your opponent's just going to fold a lot of his 2-pair hands in this situation. So it's like you're not really getting any value from weaker hands. You're basically praying that your opponent has a jack, and he's still going to be calling a smaller bet size in the spot. If you bet 15,000, and then you set up a $45,000, what is it? No, $55,000 river bet there in this situation, which will be. So he has 40,000 behind. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if he's saying I'm setting up for the pot size river bet. It sounds like he's just basically saying, I pray that my opponent has a jack, and when he has a jack, I'm just going to cooler the fuck out of him. But when he doesn't have a jack, he's just going to fold. And I mean, I don't know. I always try to think about players from other perspective, why they might make the play, and I don't know. It's just like, it's not like Tom Dwan can really call here with some hands with implied odds. Doesn't really have much behind. He's got 40,000 behind, but I think he's really just going to fold a lot of his 2-pair hands. He might call with some sets. He might call with some 3-pair hands. Now, if he calls a lot with sets and 3-pair hands, then this bet size I like it a lot more. And if we can say that Tom Dwan's calling range for 15,000 or 14,000 and 21,000 doesn't differ that much, then this size might be good. But in terms of, it just makes Ivey's range, basically. I mean, he doesn't have any bluffs in his hand. So as an opponent, it's going to make him pretty easy to play for the most part. Unfortunately, when you have a jack, it's just like, well, FML. So let's get to the river. And the river is going to introduce one of the most important possible concepts in Pot Limit Omaha.
Big river card for Tom Dwan.
Tom's only decision now is how much money is he going to be able to get out of Ivey.
And you'll notice Ivey instantly checking with the pair on board.
We've seen Ivey make some good laydowns in the past. I'm not sure if Ivey's going to be able to lay this straight down right here.
Dwan taking his time here. Is this Hollywood?
This is definitely an act here. He only has about $40,000 behind. His only real play here is to push all in.
And that's exactly what he does. Almost 40,000.
Phil Ivey does not like that bet.
All right. So Tom Dwan goes, by the way, I got to say, I love this commentary. We got Andy Block on the commentary. We got Ali Najad on the commentary. And not quite sure if these guys would be, I mean, with the commentary, I don't know. Obviously, they see the hand. They know what they're saying. But the commentary is certainly, whether it's, not sure which stakes it falls at in terms of, but they can't get too deep into it. So I'm sure they're both great Pot Limit Omaha players. But Ali Najad's more of a host, and he does a great job. Shout out to Ali Najad, by the way, man. That guy's he's been killing it for a long time. He does a great job. But go back to the hand. So Ivey checks. Now Dwan goes all in, $40,000, $64,000 pot. Ivey's got to call $40,000 to win 140. And now he's got a situation where, what should he do? So this is a concept in Pot Limit Omaha that a lot of break-even losing players don't think about. And a lot of slightly winning players maybe misapply slightly. And the great players just fucking crush this idea, which is turning hands into bluffs on the river. Now, Tom Dwan in this spot doesn't have a hand. He needs to turn to a bluff on the river. But hypothetically, let's say he does have a jack high straight in this spot. This is the perfect spot to turn your jack high straight into a river, try to get your opponent to fold off a chop or fold off ace jack. So in this situation, we can go back to the flop, go back to the turn. We've already established that Ivey is incredibly imbalanced in this situation, although some of those unbalanced hands are going to have some 2-pair hands, but we've kind of decided that he's not going to have many 2-pair hands on the flop. For instance, we said king 9 jack type hand he probably wouldn't have. King queen jack he probably wouldn't have. He might have a king 10. We probably wouldn't. He might have king 10 something, but we said he wouldn't bet that hand on the turn, right? So now we're saying, once this is kind of what I mean by your hands incredibly face up in the spot where anytime a board pairs like this in this situation, your hand is, by the way you played it, it's going to be kind of obvious. And you're going to be able to be taken advantage of by your opponent Potentially easy, potentially not easy. I mean, that's kind of, up to your opponent and up to your ability to figure out what your opponent's game plan and strategy is. So in this spot, if I'm Dur, I'm betting my entire range in this situation. If I have ace jack, I'm betting it. If I have any jack, I'm betting it. If I have any combination of 2 pair, I'm betting it. I'm betting my entire fucking range. So yeah, any hand I'm betting here. And the goal is to get Ivey to it's kind of, this is kind of funny, is that I feel like Ivey, well, I guess in this spot, would Ivey bet king 9? I think he'd bet king 9. I think he would bet king 10, king queen. Like I said, I just, if he had those hands somehow, I think he would always bet them. So yeah, in this spot, I'm just going to always bet. And it's kind of weird because when you have a straight, you're hoping he folds. When you have a jack, you're hoping he folds. When you have a full house, you're hoping he calls. So I'm not sure what the term for that is. It's not really merging your range. I mean, I guess in a way you're merging your range, but we're betting 100% of our range in the situation that we get to here. Now, what does that do if our opponent knows we're betting 100% of our range here and we're not checking back anything? Well, does that mean he should start calling with a hand like ace jack? Does that mean that he should ever start calling with a hand like 10 jack? I think that at some point in time, it does mean that Ivey should be calling with ace jack. And that's really going to come down to our frequencies for bluffing in this spot. So I guess we can kind of go back to the flop, and when we lead and Tom Dwan calls, what hands do we put him on? We have already kind of established that. King queens, the king 9s, 2 pairs, sets, gut shots with plus pairs. On the turn, we bet big. Tom Dwan calls. What hand do we put him on? Well, we put him on a lot of hands that have 3 pair or have a jack in it. Once again, we go back. We thought a lot of his hands that have a jack in it also likely have 1 pair or 2 pairs. Pretty simple. Now we go to the river. River's a king. So a lot of Tom Dwan's hands, now that we kind of established he had on the flop and he had on the turn, there's going to be a lot more combinations of full house in his range than are going to be naked jacks. We can assume he's folding some 9 jacks, 10 jack, we might think he might be likely to raise, so it's going to be harder for him to have that hand. And also he's opening. How many combinations, once again, of bad jack 10s is he opening? Well, probably a bunch if he's opening king jack 10 5. So it's kind of a situation where Ivory, we have to figure out, what's my opponent doing? Is he ever checking back? And if he's always betting, then it's just a very fucking tough spot to play. And I don't think there's really any right or wrong answer to play, right or wrong answer to the situation. I think it becomes a wrong answer if you've seen your opponent not turn hands into bluff in this spot. So for instance, if your opponent checks back ace jack here and checks back 10 jack here, that's a lot of information. So if you see your opponent check back a straight, this is why you fucking pay attention, guys. This is why you review your hands. This is why you go over hands. You think about it from another person's perspective. This is why you do these things, is so you're prepared for a moment like this against an opponent. This is what I'm talking about, man. Over these videos, this is what the common theme is going to be. You put in the work, man. You put in the effort because you're fucking prepared for a situation like this. And when you see your opponent checks back a jack here, now our combination we were just talking about, that all changes, right? That all changes. And if we can take some of those out, does that mean that we're more likely to call in this spot? Well, it's going to depend, right? If we see our opponent checks back queen 10 jack in this spot or queen 9 jack in this spot, and he doesn't turn that into a bluff in this spot, takes out a little bit more combinations. But once again, does that matter? Does that matter in this spot? Maybe, maybe not. Does that matter overall, paying attention to a hand like that? Yes, matters a ton. And in this situation, if I'm Phil Ivey, man, I'm gonna be sad, but I'm gonna have to make a tight fold, and yeah, I'm just gonna make a tight fold. This is a big thing, man. You got to be able to fold rivers in PLO. You can't just hero call rivers in Pot Limit Omaha. Most likely, if you're calling a lot more rivers than you're betting, you're a losing player. And one of the biggest ways that people lose at Pot Limit Omaha is making false assumptions of our opponent's range when we have absolutely no concrete evidence to make that type of assumption. And therefore, we make a decision based on false information, and we don't even know why we're making the decision in the first place if we had the correct information. So sure, sometimes you're going to make the right decision. You're going to click the right button. That's going to be in your head that, oh, I did this, so it must be right. When in reality, you have absolutely no idea what you were doing or why you did it. And in the short term, like I said, variance, be on your side. you're going to win some percentage of the time. But in the long run, you're going to be losing. And in the game of Pot Limit Omaha, we all know you want to be on the right side of math in situations. And if you're making a call and you're losing 73% of the time, you're winning 27% of the time, that is what we call on the wrong side of math, according to the current number system given to us by our forefathers who created the number system.
If it went check, check, Ivy would be pretty confident on winning the pot.
Phil folds, and Tom Dwan takes an over $100,000 pot down.
Another great laydown from Phil Ivey. He's really showing why he's one of the top players in the world.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this episode of PLOker Hands. Appreciate all the comments. Appreciate all the people that make it this far in the video. I love the comments, by the way. I love engaging with the comments in the chat. Unfortunately, it would take up way too much of my life if I just spent all the time answering all the great questions. Shout out to Joshua Hoggart in the chat. I love your fucking comments, buddy. I fucking love them. I love anyone that dives deep in the chat. Anyone that wants to get better at Pot Limit Omaha, let me know in the chat. I want to know who wants to get better at this game. Who wants more stuff? We got a lot of stuff planned, a lot of ideas, a lot of fun things, and I'm going to be bringing it to you guys this year. I'm excited. I'm pumped up. I hope you guys enjoyed. And, man, let's fucking get it. I don't know. Let's wrap it up.